The train was running 12 minutes late, which meant I was going to be late to a meeting I didn't want to attend anyway. I stood on the platform at Union Station, with my coffee going cold in my hand, and checked my phone twice in 30 seconds like that was going to change anything. The 742 to Glenview was stuck somewhere between here and Western. No explanation, no update, just the little yellow triangle on the app that meant sit down and wait. I found a bench near the end of the platform, set my bag between my feet, and tried to care about the email my boss had sent at 6:45 that morning about Q3 projections. I got through the first paragraph, then I stopped. That was when I noticed her. She was 2 benches down, sitting sideways with one leg crossed over the other, a hardcover book open in her lap, not her phone, an actual book with a paper cover and a crease down the spine from being opened too many times. She was reading like the delay didn't exist, like the platform noise and the announcements and the guy 3 feet away on a loud call about his mortgage refinancing were all happening in a different city. I looked back at my phone, read the same sentence again, looked up. She turned a page. There was something about her that was hard to explain. She wasn't performing anything. She wasn't arranged for anyone to notice her. She was just there, completely inside whatever world she was reading, and somehow that made her impossible to ignore. The train announcement came. 11 more minutes. I put my phone in my pocket. By the time we boarded, I had learned 2 things about her. She was a fast reader, and she chose the quiet car without hesitating. So did I, though I'll admit that wasn't my original plan. I usually took whatever car was closest to the Esters. That morning I walked the extra length of the platform. She sat by the window, book still open, bag on the aisle seat. Not rude about it, just not inviting. I found a seat 3 rows back on the opposite side and told myself that was that. It almost was. Except she laughed once, very quietly, to herself, at something on the page. Short and private, like she'd forgotten she was in public. She pressed her lips together right after and kept reading. I watched the skyline through the window for the rest of the ride, and tried to figure out why a quiet laugh from a stranger was the most interesting thing that had happened to me in months. I didn't see her again for 2 weeks. The 742 became my train. I told myself it was because the timing worked better with my schedule, which was partially true. I told myself it had nothing to do with the woman, with the book. That was less true. She wasn't there on Tuesday or Wednesday. I saw her briefly on Friday, already seated when I boarded, but I got on at the wrong end. And by the time I found a seat, the doors were closing, and that was it. The following Monday, I got to the platform 8 minutes early. She was already there, same bench, roughly. Different book. This one had a yellow cover and a library sticker on the spine. I sat on the bench across from her. She didn't look up. I had nothing prepared. No opening, no excuse to speak. Which was probably fine because I didn't usually need an excuse. I was decent in rooms, reasonably quick, not bad at conversation, when I had a reason to start one. But there was something about her focused stillness that made opening my mouth feel like interrupting a church service. So I didn't. We boarded the same car. She sat by the window again. I sat 2 rows up this time, on the same side, and spent the ride thinking about a campaign brief I needed to finish by Thursday. At the Glenview stop, we both stood to get off. She stepped into the aisle and her bag caught the overhead rack, and the yellow book slid out and landed face down on the seat. She didn't notice. She was already moving toward the door. Hey. I picked it up. Hey. I said it louder than I meant to. She turned. I held the book out. You dropped this. She looked at it, then at me. Something in her face shifted, not quite recognition, but like she was recalibrating. Thank you, she said, and took it. Good book? I asked. She considered the question like it actually needed consideration. Mostly. The ending's going to disappoint me. You already know? I can feel it coming. Authors telegraph more than they realize. The doors beep We stepped onto the platform together. And then the crowd moved, and she went left and I went right. And that was it again. But she had talked to me. And the way she said author's telegraph more than they realize had stayed with me the whole walk to the office. Her name was Willa. I learned that on a Thursday, 11 days after the book drop, we ended up standing near each other on the platform during a delay, and I asked about the book and she told me she'd been right. The ending had disappointed her. "I'm sorry," I said. "It happens." She said it like she meant it philosophically. I told her my name. She repeated it once, the way some people do when they're deciding if it fits. Then she said hers. Willa Strand. She was a restoration architect. She worked on historic buildings, mostly in the city, sometimes traveled for projects out of state. She said it the same way someone says they take out the recycling, like it was ordinary, but I'd later learn that she'd spent 2 years working on a 1920s train depot in New Mexico, and another 3 months consulting on a brownstone conversion in Philadelphia, and nothing about any of it had been ordinary. I told her I worked in marketing. Brand strategy, specifically. "Meaning you decide what things want to be?" she said. "More like I help them figure out what they already are." She looked at me sideways. That's a better answer than I expected. It wasn't a compliment, exactly, but it also wasn't nothing. After that, we talked most mornings when we were on the same train. Not always. Sometimes she was reading and I didn't interrupt. Sometimes I was on a call and she'd already be deep in her book by the time I boarded. But when we were both free, we talked. She remembered things. I mentioned an internal pitch I was anxious about on a Monday. On Thursday she asked how it went. Not in a polite way. In a way that made it clear she'd actually held on to it. I started doing the same. Noting things she said. The depot in New Mexico. The fact that she kept a running list of buildings in Chicago she thought were underappreciated. The way she described a cornice detail once, with the same focus most people saved for telling you about their vacation. One morning she brought 2 coffees, just appeared beside me on the platform with a paper cup in each hand, and held one out without explaining herself. "Black, right?" she said. I stared at the cup. "How did you know that?" She raised an eyebrow. "You're always holding a black coffee when you get here." I was going past Everett's anyway. I took the cup. It was good coffee. Better than what I'd been buying from the cart by the entrance. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome." We stood on the platform and drank coffee and watched the train come in, and I felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't been aware was unsettled. She invited me to a building tour she was running for a small architectural preservation group on a Saturday in October. "You don't have to," she said. "It's probably not your thing." "It might be," I said. "It involves a lot of standing in old rooms and listening to me explain why things are interesting." "That sounds fine." She looked at me evenly. "All right," she said. "I'll send you the address." The building was a 1907 warehouse in the West Loop that was being converted into mixed-use commercial space. Willa walked 8 of us through it for 2 hours. I had expected to be politely bored. I was not politely bored. She had a way of pointing at things, a beam, a window frame, a section of exposed brick, and making you see what you'd been looking at without seeing. She talked about the decisions the original builders had made. Why they'd used this material instead of that one, what it said about how they thought about the future. She talked about what the building had survived. The fires, the rezoning, and the years when nobody wanted old things because new things were cheaper. Afterward, the group went to a bar 2 blocks away. I stayed close to Willa, and she let me. At one point she was talking to an older man about a permit issue she was dealing with downtown, and she reached out and touched my arm briefly to keep me from drifting away. She didn't look at me when she did it. She just kept talking, but she kept her hand there for a moment longer than necessary. On the walk back to the train, I said her name. "Willa." She looked over. "What?" I didn't have anything planned, the same problem as always with her. Nothing, I said. I just wanted to see if you'd answer. She gave me a look that meant she was filing that away. Then she almost smiled. I usually answer, she said. The following Monday she wasn't on the train, or Tuesday. I told myself she was working from home, or traveling for a project. Neither was unreasonable. She'd mentioned something about a site visit. By Thursday, I realized I was checking the platform before I even got to the bottom of the stairs. She came back the next Monday. She got on one stop after me and walked past without slowing down and sat in a different part of the car. Not far, but not the same section. I thought I had maybe read things wrong. I read a work document on my phone for 35 minutes and felt genuinely lousy about it. She was there. On Wednesday, same thing. Different section. No eye contact. I kept waiting for her to look over. She didn't. I almost sent her a message that night. We'd exchanged numbers after the buildings tour. I got as far as typing her name in the message field and stopped. On Friday morning she appeared at my elbow at the platform while I was staring at my phone. "Everett's Run," she said. I looked at her. Sure. We walked to the coffee shop 1 block from the station. It was colder now, almost November, and the sky had that gray flannel look that meant Chicago had decided to be serious. She ordered her usual and I ordered mine, and we stood by the window waiting. "You've been quiet," I said. She looked at her hands on the counter. No. Did I do something? No. She said it immediately, which meant she'd thought about how to answer that. No. You didn't. Okay, I said. I let it sit. She picked up her coffee when it came and turned it slowly between her palms. I just needed a few days to think about something. About what? About what I'm doing. I watched the side of her face. Which is what? She looked up at me then, and there was something in it I hadn't seen before. Willa usually looked at things straight on, like she'd already decided whether they were worth her time. This was different. This was someone standing at the edge of saying something and not sure they should. "Taking the 742, she said finally. She picked up her bag. I followed her back out into the cold. We were almost at the platform when she said, "I should tell you something." My stomach did a thing I didn't ask it to do. "Okay," I said. She stopped walking. "Not here. After work. Can you meet me?" "Yes," I said, too fast, but I didn't take it back. We met at a wine bar in River North, called Soren's, that she'd picked. Small, low light. The kind of place where people talked at actual volume, instead of performing their conversations. She was already at a corner table when I arrived, a glass of white wine in front of her, and her hands folded on top of the table, like she was about to chair a meeting. Except Willa always looked composed. Right now, underneath the composure, something was different. I sat down. The waiter came and I ordered whatever she pointed at on the menu. He left. "You look like you're about to fire me," I said. She didn't smile. "I rehearsed what I was going to say," she said. "I had a version that was logical and made me sound reasonable. What happened to it? I decided you'd see through it. That made me quiet. I waited. She looked at the table, then at me. "The first morning on the platform, when I was reading, I knew who you were before you said anything. I didn't move. My firm was in early conversations about a city-sponsored project," she said. "One of the other stakeholders mentioned your agency as a possible partner on the public communications side. I looked up who I'd be dealing with. I found your LinkedIn, some interviews you'd done, a panel discussion from last year." She paused. "I recognized you on the platform the first morning." I heard myself breathe. "I didn't plan the book drop," she said quickly. "That was real. I didn't notice it fall." She looked at me steadily. "But I knew who you were when I thanked you for picking it up." The wine bar noise continued around us. Glasses, low conversation, music barely audible. I was aware of all of it in a very distant way. "The coffee," I said, "on the platform. I wanted an excuse to talk to you that didn't feel like a business introduction. You said you were going past Everett's. I was. A small pause. I went past it because you were on the platform. I sat back in my chair. Something was reorganizing itself in my head. Every morning I'd thought was chance. Her on the bench, her in the quiet car, her knowing I took my coffee black. The building tour, I said. That was real, she said. I run those twice a year. I invited you because I wanted to. Her voice was careful, precise, the same way she talked about cornices and permits. The beginning wasn't real. Everything after wasn't planned. I didn't say anything for a long time. Why are you telling me this? I finally said. She looked at me directly. Because I'm not interested in building something on a version of the story that isn't true. I wanted to say something sharp. I had earned it. I sat across from her and felt the specific, clean hurt of finding out that a thing you thought was luck was actually someone else's decision. She had watched me on the platform and chosen not to say. She had walked me through that building and chosen not to say. She had handed me coffee on a cold morning and called it coincidence. That mattered. I needed her to know that. You let me think the whole thing was random, I said. Yes. For months. Yes. That's a long time to be performing something. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. I know. I need you to understand that I'm not fine with it, I said. Not yet. I know that too, she said. I'm not asking you to be. We ate dinner after that, or tried to. The conversation moved around the edges of everything. She told me more about her father, how he'd built a small general contracting company over 20 years, and then trusted the wrong partner at the wrong moment and lost most of it by the time she was in college. She said she'd grown up watching what happened when people let warmth do the work that judgment was supposed to do. So you decided to be the opposite, I said. I decided to be careful. And planning out the first conversation with a potential business contact. That felt careful. It felt controlled. She said it without flinching. I know the difference. I told her things I hadn't planned to say. About work, about the year I'd spent climbing toward a role that looked exactly like what I'd want at 26, and turned out to feel like wearing someone else's coat. About how I'd gotten very good at sounding certain in rooms full of people who needed someone to sound certain, and how that had started to feel like the whole job. She listened without moving. At one point she said, "You're describing the thing people usually figure out at 40. I'm a fast learner," I said. Apparently not about train schedules, she said. That almost made me laugh. Almost. When we stepped outside, the temperature had dropped. Wind off the lake. She pulled her coat closed and we stood on the sidewalk under the glow of the wine bar, neither of us walking yet. I need some time, I said. She nodded. Okay. Not because I've decided anything. I just need to think without. I gestured slightly in her direction. Without me managing the conversation. Yeah. She looked at me for a long second. Then she said, I'll be on the 7:42 Monday. If you're there, I'm glad. If you're not, I understand. She walked to the corner and flagged a cab and got in. I stood there for a moment in the cold, watching the cab move into traffic. I couldn't tell if I was angry or just tired, and I wasn't sure it mattered which. I took the whole weekend. Saturday I went for a run longer than my usual, and thought about it until I stopped being able to think in straight lines and just let it move through me. She had known. She had staged the conditions for something, and then let it feel like fate. That was the part I kept landing on, the particular unfairness of having a private moment, a thing you thought was yours, and finding out someone else had scripted the setup. But I also kept thinking about the building tour. The way she'd touched my arm to keep me in the conversation. She hadn't needed to do that. There was no strategy in it, and the morning with the coffee, the real coffee, the part she'd admitted was an excuse but still gone out of her way to make happen. There was something in that too. She could have not told me. That was what kept coming back. She had everything to lose and she'd told me anyway. In a quiet corner of a wine bar she'd chosen carefully. With her hands folded on the table, and her composure showing its seams for the first time. That was not a move from someone who was still performing. Sunday night I sat on my couch for a long time doing nothing. Then I called my brother, who has never been wrong about a single piece of advice in his life and is insufferable about it. He listened. Then he said, "Do you like who you are when you're around her?" I thought about it. I said yes. He said, "Then figure out the rest." I went to bed. Monday morning I got to the platform at 7:34. She was already there, standing this time, not sitting, her bag over one shoulder and no book in her hands. She saw me, chumming, and stayed very still. I stopped beside her. "Hi," she said. "Hi." The announcement board showed the train was on time. 2 minutes. I looked at the tracks, then at her. "I'm not saying it's fine," I said. "The beginning. I know. I'm saying I believe the rest." She looked at me the way she looked at buildings, like she was taking in the full structure before she said anything about it. "Why?" "Because you didn't have to tell me," I said. "You could have kept it, and I wouldn't have known. And you told me at exactly the moment it was most likely to cost you something." The train came in, and the platform noise rose around us. She didn't move. "That counted," I said. I needed a few days, but it counted. For a second, nothing on her face changed. Then something did, not much, just enough. The same small shift I'd seen in the wine bar when she'd stopped reciting the version she'd rehearsed. Something more honest underneath it. "Okay," she said. We got on the train. She sat by the window. I sat next to her, not across, right next to her. And she didn't say anything about it. About 5 minutes in, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper and held it out to me, without looking up from the window. I unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map. Small, penciled lines, with tiny notations in her careful architect's script. A few city blocks. A building marked with a small star. At the bottom, in the same dark, precise handwriting, "The Linden, 1912. Been trying to get access for 2 years. Got it last week. Thought you might want to see it before anyone else does." I looked at the map for a long time. Then I folded it and put it in the front pocket of my jacket. "When?" I said. "Saturday, if you're free." "I'm free." She nodded once and looked back out the window. Outside, the city slid past. Neighborhoods I'd ridden through 100 times without thinking about them. This time I looked,